Welcome to Off Watch, our weekly interview series. A couple of weeks ago, we spoke to Emily Nagel, who did her first ocean race with the last edition onboard team Axonabel. She's been pretty busy since then, sailing on a variety of different boats, but most recently, she's been sailing on an IMOCA 60. And as these boats are going to feature pretty heavily in the next edition of the race, I thought it would be a good idea to check in with her again after her ocean crossing to get an idea about the boats, the technology, and what it takes to sail them well. If you enjoyed this interview, you can subscribe to our channel for many more to come. And of course, in the comments below, we're always taking your suggestions on what questions you want us to ask. Enjoy. Last time we spoke, you'd obviously been out in the Med, you'd done some pretty cool sailing there. You were talking to us about how you were involved with, Sail GP. And obviously everything that you've done with the VO65s in the last edition, but lately you've been out on one of these new fancy IMOCA 60s. You've just done a transatlantic. So I was really keen to talk to you and get an idea. What's the difference? What's the major sort of standout difference? So talk us through from the beginning. You make your first step onto a 60. Everything in your mind, you are used to stepping on board a 65 day in, day out. So you step on board a 60, straight away, what strikes you?
In general, they're just quite different because they're not one design. So everything's open and suddenly, you've got this whole branch of, all of the IMOCAs, they've got the same general concept. They've all got the main kind of similarities. But, when it comes to the foils and the general layout of the boat, everything is just super different, and there's room for kind of constant change. So from day one, we had the opportunity to just play with everything, and just the boat from when we left the dock to when we arrived in Newport was quite different, just from change of setup, and then just trying to make it more aero here and there. The whole thing is just constantly trying to update the design and make it as fast as possible. While with the 65, a lot of it is, you've got to stick to the rules and have it how it's designed. While this is you just want to go fast.
So, that obviously lends a little bit of pressure to preparation time now. If you've got your 60 now, like you say, it's not going to be the end product that you're going to take to the start line. 65, you can rock up 2 months before the race, and as long as you read the book on how to do it and you don't break anything, you'll be okay.
Exactly. Right now is the time to be developing the 60s because, time is money, and the teams that are getting ready now are going to be on the front of the line. It's invaluable, this time for foil testing, for testing different shapes, figuring out, how to make the boat rip. The one thing with the IMOCAs at the moment, with the Vendée is, there is development and they're all testing new foil designs, but no one's really pushing the envelope too much. They know what works, they know what's fast, so they're not really going too outrageous with anything. But with the Volvo, you've got, it's still the same boat, but you've got this different opportunity where, you've got more time. And because you've got more people on board, you can push the boat that bit harder. You can go for something a little more outrageous. You've got the time to test it, see how it works, and you're not going up against necessarily all the Vendée boats. So why not do something different?
Okay, so they talk me through it then in a really sort of basic, let's just very safely assume that I haven't been on an IMOCA 60, and what do you know, that is the case. In my head, when I see the images of these boats out in the water, and my word, they perform, foils sticking out everywhere. You arrive to it next to the dock. Are the foils, does it just sit next to the dock? Is it able to sort of park up in the same way that a 65 would?
No, it's got a bit more of an obstacle course to get to. Some specially designed fenders that kind of gap out the space between the foil and the dock. So you've got to hop onto that first and then hop onto the boat. So it gets a little more high risk if you're carrying anything, because you're on this little wobbling fender for a little bit before you get onto the boat. But yeah, it's still right there. It just adds to the challenge a little more.
And then on board the boat, the 65s, I think, it was relatively open, deck layout relatively open. And, you guys have all said to us, I mean, I've been on a 65 on a lovely, calm, sunny day in a harbour, but it's a wet boat. So straight away, when you jump on board the 60, you've got much less exposed space.
It's very, very weird. For the entire transatlantic, I didn't have to put a spray top on. Undercover pretty much the whole time. We had 35 knots, but only one person would go out at a time. And there were a couple points where, they'd put on a spray top, but I mean, I did sail changes up front in salopettes because, we were taking it easy during changes, getting used to everything.
Sure.
But for the most part, like when you're ripping along, you're completely undercover. You've got your head sticking in a little window and you see the waves smash into it and you're just completely dry in your pajamas, chilling out, just driving it, foiling along, big waves and staying dry, which is weird.
Does that change the way you would sail it? I mean, I know that you guys would push it, Southern Ocean, flat water, whatever, you guys push it. But psychologically, is there a feeling of, well, we're fine, we're well within safety limits?
There's definitely some unnerving points, like not being able to see the waves, and it's so uncomfortable. It was the most uncomfortable 2 weeks I've ever had on a boat. I mean, leaving, I felt how you felt now for the first time offshore. First 2 days, like literally straight out, I'm there puking up off the back.
Yeah, that's me.
Which I haven't had before. I didn't laugh.
So look, not to dwell on the sort of grotesque, but why was that? It's just got a very bizarre sort of pitch and roll.
Yeah, so it's a combination really of, you're undercover so you can't see the horizon. So your head is pretty much at deck level because, everything's lower. So with the 65, you're standing on top of the deck. So you've got a couple of meters at least of height above the waves and you can kind of see what's coming next. But with the 60, your head is at deck level. So not only can't you see the horizon, you also can't see the waves that are coming. So you're doing everything off of feel and numbers. And you could basically be driving blind. So it's kind of getting used to that. But then also the way that, the boat hits the waves is different because even if you're not fully foiling at times, you've still got the support of the foil. So you're not slamming into the waves that you do with the 65 and that rhythmic kind of, you slam into them hard, but you know when to expect it. With the 60, you're kind of skipping on top of the waves. So they're hitting further back, kind of amidships. And rather than slamming into them, the waves are coming up to you. So it's kind of this heave motion rather than forward slamming. So you're there going along. You might occasionally see a wave. You expect to kind of plow forwards into it. And you're bracing to go forwards, and instead it's the top of your head that slams into the cabin top. Which just throws everything out of balance.
It's an interesting downside to what we've all been saying is an upside, this idea that, well, when you're in the cabin, you're nicely sort of undercover. But of course, as you say, you're also down below. And anybody that suffers from seasickness will know, don't go down below, stay on the horizon. Is it a motion that you managed to get used to? It took some reprogramming, but then you knew what to expect.
Yeah, like the seasickness definitely disappeared after a couple of days as you kind of got used to the fact that you can't see the horizon and you're going in this motion. But it definitely never got comfortable. I mean, we were all in a pretty bad state by the time we got to the other side of the Atlantic, just from being down below. 'Cause you'll be there driving for a couple hours, just sending it, having a blast, like, but you still feel all the waves that you're kind of hitting. You're like, oh, that's not going to be very nice down below. You go down below and you're not sleeping half the, like, if you're up on the foils ripping, it's painful.
Right. Well, let's talk then a little bit about down below, because that's probably one of the biggest question marks that there was when the race decided we're going to go IMOCA, was the amount of space. You take one extra crew member, and obviously you need to take the water, the food, the safety provisions for those crew members. So everything kind of gets pretty packed in quite quickly. What was your sort of first impressions between that 65, lots of different places to store, and then the IMOCA?
Yeah, there's no space. It is cozy down below. I mean, obviously it was designed for one person to be living down there. And now suddenly you've got 6 with the OBR. So like with the 65, everyone had their bunk. Like, you shared it with obviously one other person who was on your off watch, but now there's less bunks. So we had 2 on board, which still isn't enough because you've got only 2 people up on deck, so 4 people down below trying to sleep. Yeah. 2 bunks. One of those is at the back of the boat, which was pretty much unusable. I mean, you'd try and sleep, but it wasn't really happening back there. And then, might have a bean bag further up, literally right next to, the hatch where you enter. That is a sleeping spot. So you just end up with just people everywhere, just trying to find anywhere that's comfortable, people to leeward, people, in the bilge essentially, and, the lucky person up in the bunk. Although, I mean, I never managed to get a spot in the bunk, but they insisted it was no comfier than the beanbag on the floor.
They would tell you that if you never managed to get there. I think you've been played. One of the things with the 65s is I remember Scallywag made a big push to go, we're going to go less people, save the weight, and everybody concluded that actually on a 65 more hands is good. The maneuvers with everything, you need hands on the pumps, you need everything. So you had obviously we're overloading the IMOCAs in one sense, but the boats, as you say, are getting pushed harder. They've been uprated so that they can make use of the extra hands. Did you feel like, actually, a couple more people would be good here, or is it the right number that we have at the moment sailing that boat?
I don't think you could fit any more people on that boat. It's definitely cool to have 5 people sailing it. It really helps with the driving side. I mean, 2 hours in the nasty stuff was long enough to be steering for.
You just burn out your concentration.
Yeah, just staring at the numbers for that long with no other kind of, I mean, you don't have the wind in your face or the waves in your face, which, as unpleasant as it is, do normally wake you up a bit. While driving, just staring at the numbers, you start to lose feel a bit more. So I think, we tried different combinations of how long you're driving and whether the autopilot's doing any, but I think 5's a good number for sailing it, because you need that rotation. But any more, and there's just no space in the cockpit, no space down below. It's there was times when you can't sleep and you try and come up and sit around in the cockpit, and there's nowhere to sit. You've got enough space just for the 2 people on watch, and then anyone else, it's oh well, you can sit to leeward, you can kind of sit in the hatch. Everyone just kind of squeezes in. Even going from maneuver, you get pretty cozy pretty quickly.
What was easier then? I mean, yes, you're undercover. There's that. Well, I'm going to be reluctant to say the word comfort now with everything else that you've described, but there's that change. Was there anything that you went, oh wow, on a 65 that would take time and effort, and on a 60, 2 bits of string and a little bit of a pull?
I mean, just moving the sails around was incredible. I can do the stack by myself.
Just so much lighter.
Everything is so much lighter. All of the sails, there isn't a single sail that I can't move on deck alone. Obviously they're all easier if you have two, but on the 65, like, you can stare at the masthead and it's just not going to be able to do anything by yourself. You have to wait for someone else to come along. While the 60, you could have someone down below sorting the stack out down there, someone on deck doing the stack up there, and the other person in the cockpit prepping everything else. And it's a lot lightweight compared to the 65.
And what about sailing with the foil? For most of us that have had a bit of, foiling experience, it will all be dinghies. And, we're used to, let's take the Moth, for example, which I know you're racing at the moment. And it's that complicated, it's not complicated, quite clever system of auto trimming the foil based on your height and everything. But there's a lot of dynamic trimming going on. Either you're doing it or a system's doing it. On the 60, do you put the foil out, set it, go? Do you have someone there kind of playing with it? And I also respect the fact that there might not be things that you're able to say for different teams wanting to be a little bit more secretive. But what was it like putting that foil also into the equation when you were sailing?
I think the best way to think of it is just like a sail, with kind of the rate of how much you're trimming it. It depends on the conditions, what angles you're doing. Like, there's times where, it's still a learning curve and a science, I think, for all the teams to just figure out, how much do we want to be trimming it? How much can we just set and forget? And, what's more important, trimming the sails constantly or trimming the foil constantly? So it was definitely something that was played around with, but you do have the option to be playing it the entire time. But then, it's also at the sacrifice of maybe not being able to trim the Traveller as much or the main sheet as much. There's times when it doesn't really help playing it as much, and you just kind of set it and deal with all of the other chaos that's going on. But, there's times where we're kind of like, let's just see what happens and just try and get up and ripping and constantly playing it as you would with like a GC32 foil and things like that. So there's definitely options about how you approach the foil trim, whether it's constant or set and forget. What the right answer is, I think there needs to be a bit more testing before it becomes apparent.
Yeah, still plenty of room for development there, which is why I think the next few years is going to be, it's going to be quite enjoyable. Lastly, then, for, two questions basically. Was the ocean race right to include the IMOCA in the way that it's done? Do you think that the IMOCA will is the right step? And secondly, from having a sail on it and all the things that were fun and all the things that weren't, are you thinking, that's a boat that I want to jump back on?
The 60 is definitely cool. And it's really exciting that, the ocean race are involving the 60 in the next race. Personally, for me, it's the design side that just really excites me. Like, the fact that it isn't one design and you can have all these elements that you're changing, and the boats will be different in different conditions. I think there's some things that would be a lot better if the design was opened up a little bit more and moved away from kind of the strict Vendée Globe IMOCA 60 rules. The fact that you can't have any sort of foil on the rudder is a huge limiting factor. That I think would drastically change the improvement of the boat if you were to ever get the opportunity to open that one up. But just the fact that you can have the foils and, figure out what you want to do with sails and not be restricted is, I think, going to be really exciting for viewers to watch, and just seeing where the design goes from that. There's a huge learning curve available now for the Vendée sailors as well, because, they can do something different. But, there is still a little bit of love for the 65s with, the one design racing where it is, you couldn't beat the finish last time around. So, I definitely, if the opportunity was to go on a 60, it would be pretty awesome way to go around the world. But equally, the 65 still good fun, just a bit wetter.
There you go. Keep your options open. Perfectly. All right, Emily. Thank you very much. I know you're going to get back out in the water pretty soon, so I'll let you get on with your day. Thank you very much for that, and fingers crossed we see you out there pretty soon.
Fingers crossed.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview and another chance to check in with Emily Nagel and learn a little bit more about the IMOCA 60s, the foil, and what it's going to take to sail those boats in the next edition of the race. If you enjoy this interview, we've got ones coming out every week, and you can subscribe to our channel for more. And in the comments below, let us know who you want us to talk to and what questions you want answers to. We'll see you next time.